One. Hello! I'll probably even start this recording with saying one. I think I pressed one whilst I pressed record, but hello, welcome to the Monday Mystery Meeting, number 15. Wow, number 15. And as you can see, we have got Tim Scarborough here with us. So, Tim, thank you for joining us for a Monday Mystery Meeting. Hello.
I'm happy to be here now. You're scraping the barrel for people.
Don't say that, because whoever I asked for number 16 was still even worse. So again, I know I say this every week, but people from Riverside, I'm sure you've seen Tim playing on the percussion and drums at on the stage at church. But there are people who watch this that aren't from Riverside. So Tim, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, very potted history. I'm 50. I'm very nearly 56, coming up in a couple
21.
of weeks.
You look 21.
No, I'm working on it. And I was born into a Salvation Army family. So my parents were officers, which is like the clergy in the Salvation Army. So that was my life until I was about 17, 18. It was just totally Salvation Army. And I didn't know there was anything else. And then I started to sort of discover other kinds of church. I ended up going to Church of England place for a bit. Moved around a lot because of my parents' job, because they get sent, just told to move. So one of my favourite times in life was always, we would get a letter saying you're moving in 5 weeks, and then you'd get a letter a week later telling you where you were moving to. So that week was always interesting in between the two letters. Wow. So that was that. Then by the time I left home, I was in Nottingham. I stayed behind in Nottingham when my parents moved on to finish my A-levels. Then I did a nursing training, so I was a registered psychiatric nurse, which was the wrong job for me, I eventually worked out. And then I went into health promotion, which is kind of positive messages. So that was good, enjoyed that. And then I got made redundant out of the health service in about 2000, and ended up going into business for myself, thinking I was going to carry on doing the health promotion work, and as a sideline do a bit of drumming stuff.
Yeah.
On the basis that I wonder if some people might like to get together and play drums, and that was what took off. The other thing didn't really go anywhere, and here I am 20 years later, and I have a business running drum workshops for anyone who wants them, kids, adults, corporate, education, all that. I'll spare you the full blurb of the advertising.
Isn't it scary though that, I know it's bizarre, but year 2000 was 20 years ago. What is that all about?
It's true. Blink and it's gone, right? Yeah. So that's me and my work history. Personally speaking, I got married to Caroline in 1989. We had an interesting struggle. We waited 10 years before we had kids, and we were astonished to find that we were having kids because we'd been told we never would. And then in 2008, Caroline unfortunately died as a result of cancer, leaving me with a 2-year-old and an 8-year-old to bring up, 2 girls, which was also an interesting time. And then a few years after that, 5 years or so after that, 6 years after that, I met Pam, who some people will know is now my wife. We met in 2014, got married in 2015. She moved up here from London for that, and that then made me the patriarch of this great clan of women, because now I have 4 daughters and 2 granddaughters, along with Pam, my wife. So, you know, and even, I'm not sure, I think, yeah, the cat was male, so I did have 1 male around at some point, but, you know, hey, here I am. I'm surviving.
Wow, that's just incredible. What a brief overview. And there's so much we could dig into with all that, but it's certainly very clear from just your highlights reel, as it were. That's probably the right phrase for it.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Change is almost part of your life. There's been so much change ever since you're a child to today. And one of the things that we talk about a lot on the Monday Mystery Meeting is, how has life changed and how have you dealt with change? But almost your life has been one of change consistently,
yes,
really.
Very much so.
Yeah. So what changed really in lockdown, and how did you deal with that, really, is one of the main questions.
Well, I mean, the biggest way, really, it was the big change for everybody, wasn't it? Suddenly, we're all staying home. We're not going to work. We're not socialising, and that, to some extent, that was possibly less of a change for us than it was for a lot of people. Other than my work involved me going out quite often at 5 o'clock in the morning and not getting home till 11 o'clock at night, because I'd travel to a school somewhere in the country, do a day in a school, and do workshops in the evenings with Cubs and Scouts. So then I'd be travelling back, and I loved that. I love being on the road. I love going out and meeting people. So that, of course, got switched off completely. So then we sat and looked at each other and said, right, what are we going to do now? Because our income stream had been switched off. And we, those were the questions that we had to face. But my instinct right at the beginning was, in terms of doing anything, was that I wanted to carry on putting out what I believe are the good thing about what I do with drums. So I just went on Facebook and started putting out a sort of 20-minute thing at lunchtime and hoped people would hook into it. And quite a lot of people did, which was great. That wasn't making any money, but that wasn't the issue.
No.
I'm a great believer in get out there and sow some seed, and something will bear fruit, And the main people I had in mind were the people who might be in the situation I was so glad I wasn't in, which was I could have been that single dad at home with a 2-year-old and an 8-year-old in lockdown. And that would have destroyed me. And I'm not overstating that. I would have really, really struggled in that situation. So I was thinking about all these people who've got kids at home, and what could they do with them, So did that. And so Pam and I are used to being around each other quite a lot, so that hasn't been too much of a shock to our system. We've had to learn how to make a little bit of space around the home, so that we've not exactly got our own spaces, but that we know what goes on in the different spaces around the house.
You haven't gaffer taped a line down the middle of the house.
No, but there's the furthest back room in our house. It's not exactly a conservatory, but it's a bit like that, and that's where I'm sitting now. And it's kind of 2 meters, 3 meters by 3 meters, and it's full of all the stuff for doing the workshops. So, my stand with my iPad on it is standing on my drum in front of me where I would normally be playing. Yeah. And the computer would be over the other side, and, people would basically see this and a couple of instruments, So so Pam's had to give that up, but that means she's also been able to take over our spare room and turn it into a sewing and work room, which is great.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, and that, the positive things that have happened in that change are that we, quite early on, a few scout and guide groups spotted that we were doing the online thing at lunchtime, and they said, well, we're going to have to be doing our meetings on Zoom. Can you do a drum workshop on Zoom? And our motto in the business is, the answer's yes. What was the question? So if that kind of question comes in, we say yes, and then we work out how to deal with it. So that's exactly where we went, and just started running workshops, and that's gone crazy. I mean, we're, however far we are into lockdown now, and we have about 280 workshops in the diary since the beginning of lockdown and looking ahead. And it's just, the diary fills up quite easily. We're about a fortnight ahead. We're always busy. Wow. So busy that we've had to take a holiday. That's what we're doing next week.
So you've actually become the Joe Wicks of the drumming world.
Well, dare I say I wish I was on his money? I'm assuming.
You are allowed to say that, yes.
Yeah, if only to be able to donate it to some worthy causes, to be honest, because that's one of the things. Financially speaking, I said our income stream was switched off, but through the generosity of my brother stepped up and gave us a significant amount of money right at the beginning to tide us over. I mean, 5K, then other people have, without us asking them to, have just popped up and said, here, have this. You obviously aren't earning, have some money. The government's been great. The systems that they've put in place are working well for us. And the other thing is that the workshops that we're doing, because the Scouts and Guides don't have any income stream themselves, because they're not charging people subscriptions, we've just said, give us what you can afford.
Yeah.
the average donation is coming in at about £30.
Wow.
And, you know, without getting into the details of business, there's no expenditure because I'm not traveling. So everything that comes in is great. And we're just very, very grateful for it, which it does spin on to the question of what we've seen in terms of God looking after us during this time.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big things that we've seen.
That provision of God breaking through just when you...
Yes.
Has it always been with lots of time, or has it always just come through just when you needed it? You know, what has that looked like practically?
Well, it's been very comfortable, actually, because the first conversation we had was with my brother, and he phoned up and he said, "How are you going to get through this?" And because, I mean, basically there was a legacy that we were waiting for from a relative who died at the beginning of the year. And he said, "Look, we're both getting this amount of money, but it's going to be delayed by legal processes, but I can afford to give you yours now."
Wow.
Which was just perfect.
Yeah.
So immediately we had a buffer.
Yeah.
And then the government schemes came through, and one of my hobby horses is that I get a bit fed up of people talking about sort of, you know, that being in God's will can be hard. And that, you know, sometimes you hear people almost say things like, well, if it's something you want to do, it's not really God's will, or that kind of implication, you know. Well, I'm completely the opposite. My discovery is that if I just keep believing, sorry, that's my low battery signal, I'll plug in.
No worries.
I'll plug in, I won't disappear. So what I feel is that if I'm plugged into God, and trying to follow his ways, then God seems to stand it, you know, to be there for me. And I've had tough situations, but I don't find it helps me certainly to let God, the God bit of it, be stressful. I'm, you know, I know life is different for different people, and it doesn't always work that way for everybody, but certainly our experience in lockdown has been that God has been there ready and waiting, not making us hang on. And something that's come through for us very much, Pam and I were talking about this morning, is that she began to recognize early on that there were a number of things that God seemed to have sorted out ready for lockdown.
Wow.
And that's to do with situations with the housing for our daughters, and other things. The money thing was there as well. And that phrase, "for such a time as this," has kept coming up over and over, that it does seem that God knew for us, he knew what we would need in place, and he put it there.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I've seen, like, just from our relationship and from our conversations in you, is sometimes if some people really struggle with putting their trust in God, it's something they almost have to force themselves to do, because I'm one of those people at times. I've become very independent and I chide myself for it. But it seems to be that trusting and putting your faith in God seems to come very naturally to you. And it's just that God will be here. We're going to keep moving forwards, and God will do what God wants to do. And I've learned a lot just from watching you go through that, because you haven't just gone through that as a human being and you've experienced that, but you're seeing God turn up as you're just naturally putting your faith and your trust in him. It's been a lovely thing to see.
Yeah, and I think I take that back to the way I was brought up, because God was just integral to our life when I was a child at home with my parents. And I don't remember having a lot of conversations that were about problems and God will sort us out. I think maybe it was almost taken as read, not taken for granted, but taken as read, that God is there, and God is who we believe him to be. And I mean, if anybody ever proved to me that God isn't who he says he is, then, I mean, number one, they would have proved that God isn't, the God I believe in doesn't exist. But also that I would have to look back at my life and say, well, something was going on. Because, you know, I mean, I've had all kinds of difficult and precious situations that have worked out fine one way or another. And I'm fortunate that I'm not a worrier. I'm not a stressor. So I think some people might look at me and think I just kind of breeze through life. And sometimes it's partly because I can't remember what the problem is, to be honest. Because I mean, you could ask anybody who knows me well, you don't rely on my memory for anything. But you know, the fact is that I believe without any doubt whatsoever that God's fundamental attitude towards me is that he wants the best for me.
Yeah.
And that means if something looks really bad, it only looks really bad.
Yeah.
But that somewhere in amongst it all, God, who is in charge, I've given him my life. I want him to run my life because he's better at it than me for sure.
Yeah.
Then that's okay. As long as I keep trusting God, then it's, I guess the opposite would be if I thought, hang on a minute, this is going in a direction I don't want to, and I started fighting against it, then I would be taking it off in a direction that wasn't necessarily where God was going. So I tend to assume, but the way I want to function with God's will is, I say to God, if this isn't the right thing, stop me.
Yeah.
So I'll keep knocking on doors, and I'll keep opening doors if they open, and I'll keep walking through doors if they open.
Yeah.
But once I can't get through them, I tend to think, all right, I'll step back there. It doesn't mean I don't keep trying with some things, but you know, I've got things going on in my life where I keep banging on the door, and I honestly, I don't know why I waste my time on them sometimes, because God's put a big sign on them probably that I'm not seeing, saying, Tim, don't bother. This is not worth it.
And that's the thing. What's interesting is the way you've talked about God's will and trusting God in that. We've talked about what's changed in lockdown, but actually how you've approached life in lockdown, really, as much as there has been changes in what you're doing, but how you've approached your faith and God, that attitude hasn't changed. And I think that's really important. And I think we all need to hear that a little bit more, because God is the same yesterday, today, and forever.
Yeah.
So actually, the God who has been providing and has been stepping in and doing all of this for the last 4 months, if we haven't had that relationship with him before, we could have had, because he's always been like that. And actually, as lockdown eases and all of that, we can continue to experience what we've experienced now with God coming out the other side, as long as we stay open to him. God doesn't change. It's often us. We change the goalposts. He doesn't. And I think actually it's really important to keep that. God is consistent with us.
Yes.
So we should strive to be consistent with how we approach God as well. And I know we're human beings and we'll get it wrong sometimes, but that should be our striving.
That's me.
To be as consistent with God as he is with us. And I think if you can learn that in the trial and in the successful times, or probably the wrong word, but you know what I mean, the trials and the good times, our attitude shouldn't change. We should be the same in both.
Yeah, and there's what's that Rudyard Kipling thing in that If poem where he talks about, you know, the good things and the bad things, they're both imposters.
Yeah.
You know, and that's right, they are both imposters, because what they are is what we see and hear in this realm, in this dimension.
Yeah.
And of course, God is working, God's standing back from it all. And, you know, I sometimes think about eternity, and I think it's a bit like standing and looking at a table, and the beginning of time is the left-hand edge of the table, and the end of time is the right-hand edge of the table, and God can see everything all at once.
Yeah.
And he knows the shape of it and where it's going and how it's going to be. And for us to get too concerned about this little, you know, millimeter wide slice of the surface of the table, which is our life, and to panic about that and to worry that that's not where God is, not right with God. I mean, yes, we do want to be tuned in with God and we want to follow Jesus, but at the same time, this little bit here, even if we don't do the thing that God wished we would do, there's the overall shape that's there, and God can work it out.
And it is having that eternal perspective, and and we got to be careful with that, because we don't want to be flippant with our decisions.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if we don't have this eternal perspective, we can become completely consumed by today's problem. And I know to bring Notting Hill, but today's newspapers will be lining the fish and chips tomorrow. And actually, I love that idea that actually, today we need to know what's going on today, and we need to be aware of that. But also be aware those headlines, they're in the bin tomorrow, and there'll be some more. And we that will be just moving on.
Yeah, and not to be too sort of harsh about it, that the same applies to the things that we worry about in our own lives. That something happens today, we deal with it, we move on, and tomorrow, or at some point, we will have forgotten to an extent that happened. And I mean, I can even take that down, to as big a thing as losing my wife, and my kids having lost their mum. They're not going to be unaffected by that, and I'm not unaffected by that. That has changed me, but I don't have to keep looking back and wondering what on earth was going on. Even though, I'll be completely honest with you, I still want to know what God thinks He's playing at. That He would miraculously give us children, and then He would take away the mother of those children. But somehow in that, I'm comfortable letting that be God's problem. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, and there's so much we can just learn and take away from that ourselves, and that's just phenomenal. And it's an attitude of perspective, as I say, of who God is and who we are. It's knowing the difference between the two that you seem to be holding on to really well. So thank you for just continuing to inspire me on that journey. So thank you. I mean, I can't believe we've already been talking for nearly half an hour.
Of course we have.
I feel like we could keep talking about this. I feel like we're only scratching the surface. But before we close, at this time, in this day and age, any practical advice for the church? Anything?
Don't panic. Don't let. I mean, really practically, all this stuff about supposedly confusing advice from the government and stuff like that. You know what? It's not that confusing. If you just check it out on a reliable source, and I get fed up of hearing journalists going, the government's not giving us clear messages about this and that and the other, and actually, I don't know if I'm being too simple about it, but it seems pretty simple to me. And don't let this this situation be the thing that it's kind of what we've just been talking about. The picture is a lot bigger than COVID, and COVID's big, fair enough, but the picture is a lot bigger than that, and this too, as the saying goes, shall pass.
Yes. And I think that don't panic. I mean, and some people say that's a flippant comment, but actually panic is a choice at times, and it's what are we consumed by. Let's just say COVID is big, but God is bigger, and the thing that I'm aware of increasingly is there is other stuff going on in the world that's not COVID related, and if we're not careful, we can miss it. Like yesterday, I mean, obviously you'll watch this on Monday or next week, but we're recording this on Wednesday. Yesterday evening, massive explosion in Beirut. That's shocking and horrifying, and we that deserves our prayer and attention. And actually, it's very easy to just let that be another headline that we don't think about or care about because of COVID. Actually, there is other things going on that needs our attention too.
I'm reminded in talking this way about something that a very well known but too long ago for some people to remember Formula One driver said. His name was Emerson Fittipaldi. And he was a top level F1 driver. And somebody said to him, how on earth do you handle driving at these enormous speeds? How do you not just crash all the time? And he said, it's simple. Number one, you look as far ahead as you possibly can. Number two, you never focus on anything you don't want to hit. And if you take those into life, you look as far ahead as you can. Realistically speaking. And don't get too focused on the thing that's the problem.
Wow, I think that's really great practical advice. I mean, again, and from a Formula One driver, who knew that was coming? So, and finally, Tim, what can we be praying for you, for the area? What can we pray for, mate?
I would really hope that out of this lockdown situation will be a lasting effect for our area, for our communities, of the positivity that we've seen come through. We had all the crazy panic buying at the beginning, and then the second wave was all these people supporting one another and connecting up together. And that's what I really am hoping and praying will continue, and I'm trying to do whatever I can to try and make that happen. And then for us, it's very general, really. Keep praying God's blessings on us, because we've got them and we're enjoying them, and it'd be great if they continued. And if you want something very specific to pray about, as you know, Steve, I came straight from an appointment at the chiropractor here. My back is really giving me some jip, and it would be fantastic for me if we could get rid of that. I would love to be able to bounce around like I want to.
And the timing of this is perfect, because on Sunday, so this will come out on the Monday after the Sunday. Oh, no, it's not. No, it's not. I was forgetting. The Sunday after this Sunday, we are talking about praying and asking for healing.
Excellent.
So it's part of a whole journey that we're on. And just so, yes, we will be praying for that, for you, but for our region as well. I think you're right. That wave of goodness just continues. We can all be doing that. So yes. Thank you so much. But thank you for your half an hour. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your
Thanks for having me.
And we will, I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.